This is TeleStaff training for version 6.34. Many of you that are watching this video are previously or currently using version 2.93, and that version is a client and web-based version depending on what you're using. This version is fully web-based. So let's get started. Log in with the same credentials you did before, but as you notice that if you were logging into the website before, you had to use an access code. That's no longer necessary. It's in the URL link. Once you've logged in, you'll notice that the dashboard is significantly different than previous versions. The center section has a list of your future and current assignments. Over here on the left, you have some of your quick links to your contact log and your personal history report. This will vary depending on your department. Additionally, there's some information on the right-hand side with vacancies and requests. Most users will not have any request information if they're not someone that's responsible for approving requests. The tabs at the top are the dashboard, the calendar, the roster, personal my information, people or people filter, and reports. Then over here on the right we have the sign out button, and you want to make sure you sign out if you're using a computer that's shared by others. You want to always make sure you sign out of your account. And then just below that is the institution focus filter. Now this particular user only has one focus filter, but some users do work for more than one institution in TeleStaff, so they may have the ability to switch. Next, we're going to start with the calendar. And on this view, you see at the top we have a button to select dates. We also have two buttons that allow you to toggle between a list view and the regular calendar view. Additionally, there are some other navigation buttons over here to the right, and a weeks in view button and text box here. This gear allows you to show the detail codes. Most people aren't going to need that. Most codes for our institutions don't have detail codes, or it's not something that people need to view typically, but you could toggle it on. It's blue when it's on, it's white when it's not. Now, users that have the ability to see the advanced calendar will see it right here in the middle, and it looks like this. So you'll see advanced here, and then you'll get the people filter list to the right, where you can also limit display. You get a little bit more functionality. But for the sake of this training, we're not going to get into the advanced calendar. Now, some users may find that the list view is easier on a cell phone. If you're opening this website from your cell phone, it just displays in a more natural fashion on a phone or a tablet. But for the sake of this, we're working off of a PC, so we're going to use this traditional calendar. So let's start by changing the weeks in view. If you're set to 7, change it to 5. If you're 5, change it to 7. I just want everybody to understand how to change the weeks in view. This is really helpful if you're working with multiple weeks worth of codes, and you need a multi-select a month's worth, or in between several months, or you just want to be able to see more of the content in one space, then this is very helpful. So now that you've changed your weeks in view, and I'm going to go back to 5, go ahead and pick a day in the future. This orange space is today, and so the day in the future would be that has nothing on it, and we're going to test out putting in a sign-up code. So you just click in the blank space and then click Add. After clicking Add, you choose the code, and I'm going to just choose the first one, available any district. Then for this particular example, I'm not going to put in a specific time. I'm just going to say the whole 24 hours. And in the notes, go ahead and type example 1. Then scroll down, check the add section to see if there's any issues. Check the box if necessary, and then click save. Now, that's how you add a code. Now, to remove it, if you have that ability, you can click the box and multi-select them, or you can simply click on the code and then remove it. This particular user doesn't have the ability to remove the code. They can only add codes. So they could just add another code to that day. So let's go ahead and go to the next skill, and that's adding a leave code. So on a day that you're actually working, put it in. If you're not working, choose, there are typically some agencies have codes that act as leave codes and you don't have to be working to use them. For example, a day off assurance is kind of like a leave code, but you don't have to be working to do that. So for this example, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use scheduled vac. And what it's doing here is it's analyzing for issues. So if there's this one has these different issues that it analyzes to determine if you're actually working or if you're able to put in a leave code for this time period. And as you can see, this person is restricted to putting a code in because it's inside of 14 days. So they can't put a scheduled vac leave request within 14 days. So I can't do it on this day. So I'd have to go out further. So go to the next month. Pick a day you're working, add, choose the code again. Now it's thinking again to verify if we have the ability to put this code in. And all it's saying is it must be approved. And basically by checking this box, you're acknowledging that the leave request must be approved before it's accepted. And it'll have an asterisk on it. I'll show you that in a second. So also it defaults to the times of your current shift. This person's shift is 7:30 to 7:30, a 12-hour shift. Go ahead and change it to 2 hours and then click away, and you'll notice the time changes. Then go ahead and put in the notes example 2. And then click away again. Now, as you see, every time you change that, it has to reanalyze to determine if it still violates any issues or rules. You'll have to recheck the box, and then you can click save. This isn't very much different than previous versions. It just looks different. As you notice, there is an asterisk on this code here. So if we go to list view, it's on October 10th. And there it is, scheduled vac, and it's got an asterisk, meaning it's unapproved. And so someone will have to come in here and approve it. Some additional skills to note when you're working with the calendar. The ability to right-click, normally to get this menu to come up on previous versions of the client, you would have to right-click to get this to come up. Now you just click in an empty space and it brings up that menu. If you click on top of a code, it will bring up a series of options. If there's things like editing or removing it, then you can do that from here, but this person doesn't have those abilities. So it simply just shows them what it is. So if you right click, it's going to bring up the right click options for the web browser and not the actual website. So multi-selecting days is still an option, and you can still use the shift and control click. So if you want to click that this day and this day, you can still do control click. Depending on the type of code it is, if it's a checked record, it displays differently. So these are checked records. The other ones that were purple were unchecked records, and that's just a term that they use, which means an unchecked records means it's from an assignment, and a human hasn't necessarily touched this yet. It's just part of your assignment. So here on the checked records, you can multi-select days by clicking the box, but on the unchecked records, that's not an option, and so you would have to do a control click and add a code for that. So there's no option to remove a record that is not checked. And that's normal. It just looks a little bit different from previous versions. So again, that's the shift click and the control click options. Those still exist. If the user does have the ability to edit, remove, approve, deny, it'll be located here, and these won't be grayed out. This user does not have those abilities, so they are grayed. If you're a fan of hotkeys, most of these functions, as far as adding and removing different things, have functions and hotkeys that go along with them, and so that may be something you may want to consider getting accustomed with if you're dealing with this application on a regular basis. Last point of interest on this calendar view, if you switch to the list view of the calendar, you don't have the ability to add or there's no editing on this view. This is just a view. So on the calendar portion of it here is where you have to make all your entries. The list view is literally just a view, just a list of the items that are on your calendar. If by chance you're in a live environment and you've added codes that you don't want there, then make sure you get with your supervisor and ask them to remove the erroneous codes. That's part of the reason why we had you put the terms example 1 and example 2 in the notes so that it was obvious that it was for practice. Alright, next is the roster. Go ahead and open the roster tab, and you'll see up on the right the roster views that were previously in 2.93 should still be available, and you can select between those roster views. So go ahead and try out whatever roster view you normally use, click to it and view it and observe the differences. So it is more similar to the web view in 2.93 than the client. It is significantly different than client. The client was much more compact. Unfortunately, this web view is much less compact. There are a few options to edit the roster views if you have the privileges to do so, and you can do that with the gear. Users that have the ability to select multiple dates, typically schedulers, will be able to use this multi-dates selector here. You click the button first, then you can select multiple days, and then click Done. Typically, only if you have the ability to edit the roster will you have the ability to do multiple dates. Most users will only be able to select one day at a time. Okay, now up in the upper right-hand corner, there are these three icons. This is the vacancies button, and it brings up the vacancies windows with a list of all the vacancies on that roster date. There is the people finder button, or locate people section. This was called people finder in a previous version. Basically, it just lists all the people that are on this roster and each record for them. So you can click through and quickly go to that person's record. This is the same options that were on previous versions, just looks different. Then the last section is the people filter. This is also the same as previous versions. It just looks different. And now the filter button is up here in the filter. Brings up this window. You can have preset filters. You can save them, you can create them and then save them. Just depends on your permissions in the software. Most regular end users probably won't be able to create their own people filters or really have a need to, but that's where it is. For the purpose of this training, most users will only be viewing the roster. They won't be really editing it. Editing and making changes to the roster will be covered in additional training. So the next section we have is My Info, and this is where you can review the information that they have in TeleStaff about you, such as your name, address, phone number, contact information, also your profiles and your assignments, some of your logging information. For a general user, you won't be able to edit any of this. You'll only be able to view it, and many of these tabs won't have a lot of value to you. The most important thing is to look at this My Information tab and verify that the information on it is correct. If it's not, you should tell your supervisor. The next section is the people filter. This is similar to what was in 2.93, as many of these sections are, where you have a list of people, you have the filter button, which has a list of predefined filters, and then the gear option that allows you to export if that's something that you have the authority to do. Also, this new people filter allows you to see inactive people, which previously that was only something you could find under setup. So in the people filter drop-down, you can also choose these other options down here, the show filter edit panel. So this can bring up this filter, and you can create a new filter from here. So people filters are a great option for creating lists of people that you either need to contact or you need to export this to Excel to use it for mailers. Or if you're not exporting and you just need to see some information like phone numbers, that's here, and then you can find the phone numbers listed and you can get the people that are relevant to what you need. So say you're looking for a particular rank for a time trade, you can filter the list down to those individuals that may actually be able to help you, and you can find your contact information here. So this is just one of the features that was in a previous version, but it now looks different. So familiarize yourself with the locations of the columns and the locations of the button, and we'll move on to the next section, which is reports. So these reports are much different than in the previous versions. Although they are named similar, they look different, and they do have similar content. Some employees will have the ability to only run reports on themselves, and some others will be able to run reports on everybody. So that depends on your authorities in the software. But for now, let's go ahead and try and run the payroll report. Clicking on that, then you'll notice down below the report criteria area, there's a large Excel reports button in the upper right hand corner. If there were additional types such as HTML report, there would be additional buttons next to this one. So this is also the button that you use to execute the report. Before executing the report, you may want to change the date range or different filters. So in this particular case, I'm not going to do that. So one payroll that you might want to use work code. So you may want to limit your report based on particular work codes. So I'm not going to do that. Click Excel report. It's going to ask you to open the file or save the file. I'm going to just choose open. And there it comes up in Excel. And as you can see, this is the report giving the total earned hours for this person for last year. So that's reports. If you have the ability to run other people's reports, that's when these limits come into play, where you can limit individual shifts, ranks, probably even people, if you choose the correct filters. So that's TeleStaff 6.3. If you have any questions, contact your supervisor and they will give you the appropriate instruction.